get everyone to take your seats. We're going to go ahead and get this workshop of the Frenchtown Southside Community Redevelopment Agency started. We're going to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock as we're scheduled. I want to first of all thank everyone for coming out this evening and being a part of this workshop. It's an orientation and informational workshop. This is part of our effort to be in the community and engage the community on those issues that will impact the community. And so that's why we're here this evening at the Lincoln Neighborhood Center for our workshop. We're going to get a presentation and overview of the Community Redevelopment Agency, which will lead to a discussion of, by the board, the CRA Board, of what our future direction and priorities for this coming fiscal year will be. If there are those who would like to speak, we do have an item on the agenda where we will take comments from the public. There are speaker cards at the table in the back if you are interested in or would like to speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and if you would, when you approach the podium, give us your name and address for the record, we would appreciate it. So at this point, we'll go ahead and get started. You're sitting in for the city manager, Wayne? Okay. So, Mr. Assistant City Manager, are there any agenda modifications?
No, sir, we have none.
Okay. So that takes us to item number 3.01 is our Greater Frenchtown Southside Community Advisory, Citizen Advisory Committee Chairman here, Mr. Eric Johnson.
He's on his way.
He's on his way.
Right here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Johnson.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you for this workshop. I just wanted to say on behalf of the CAC that we want to thank the aide to Commissioner Matlow for sharing his comments. We believe that his comments, his email that was sent out to the rest of the board, pretty much captures the sentiment of the Citizens Advisory Committee. The only other concern that we might raise would be the fact of on the larger and medium-sized projects that we develop a process to have them prove out their need for CRA funding. We believe that it's really a time with the age of this CRA that it concentrates more on community projects, smaller projects that advocate our local economy and its local citizenry more than what has been done in the past. And I think that's it for our comments tonight.
Okay. Can I ask you one question? When will you all meet again? The Citizen
We will
Advisory?
meet again the second Monday of next month, I believe. Is that
Second Monday of next month. Okay. Are you all planning to take up so that you can come with an official position from the CAC on the items?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Mr. Assistant City Manager, we're on item number 3.02, the Community Redevelopment Agency Overview.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. We're going to have the introduction of the presentation. We're going to start off with Roxanne Manning. We've got other staff from the City Attorney's Office as well as Planning Department and Neighborhood and Community Services. So we're going to try to keep the presentation rolling rather smoothly.
Okay.
And we'll hit all the topics provided the PowerPoint works. So Roxanne, it's yours, and take it away.
Thank you very much. We got the PowerPoint to work, so we're good to go. Basically, what we want to do is give everyone as much of a detailed, in-depth overview as we can today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So let's start out with what is a Community Redevelopment Agency. And basically, as we've said before, they're created by Florida statutes, or they're enabled by Florida statutes. And it's an entity that a city can choose to establish that will give that city the ability to target a specific area and redevelop that area with funds that are dedicated from that area, okay? They utilize tax increment funding, which we'll go into some detail in the presentation about what that is and how it works and how much we'll be getting each year. The agency manages both programs and projects to accomplish the redevelopment goals that we have, and the agency is governed by the CRA Board. The board provides a direction. See if we can get this to go one more time. Nope. Can you guys advance that? No. No, it's the, how is the CRA created? Thank you. Let me just start with that one. The CRA was initially created by the City of Tallahassee in 1998, and that was the establishment of the agency. That is done in conjunction with the county, and it's through the adoption of an ordinance. The first thing that a CRA or the county and city have to do to establish a CRA is create what's called a finding of necessity, and that is a very long, very detailed study that quantifies the type of slum or blight conditions that exist in an area. Now, I do want to say that we did not have to use any finding of slum in the city of Tallahassee. We were able to utilize blight definitions. And basically, that can be something as simple as having inadequate infrastructure, having outdated lot and development patterns, so it's fairly broad. But you identify the area that you would like to make a CRA, the staff goes in and does a finding of necessity, brings that back out, and it is reviewed and adopted by the city and the county. Following that, they can develop or create a redevelopment plan. Now, we have two districts, we have one agency. So we have a Frenchtown Southside district and a downtown district. Each one of those districts has a separate and very distinctly different redevelopment plan. And then you create your tax increment trust fund. Now, the trust fund, you also have a separate trust fund for each agency. One of the important things to remember about tax increment and CRA funding is you can only spend the money that is generated in the specific CRA district, and you can only spend it in that district. You can't move it anywhere else, and that's one of the great beauties of a CRA. So if we could go to the French, there, thank you. I know this is a little hard to see, and I apologize for that, but you can also find these maps up online. If you look at the light yellow areas, there are two, well, technically three of them, but you have a Frenchtown CRA district, and then you have your South Side district and South City district. That is actually one district, even though it's split into three different pieces. That district is 1,858 acres. An interesting thing about it, it was originally going to end in 2030, but through a recent agreement with the county, which we'll talk about in a minute, that district has been extended in life till 2038. And there's some really good benefits there in terms of being able to accrue some TIF and do more projects in that district. The redevelopment plan for that district hits on several different topics, and it's the older redevelopment plan, and it was very ambitious. It was written by the people who came up with the idea for creating the CRA in the first place, and they intentionally kept it very broad. So we were looking at things like transportation-related projects. That can be something that is as simple as paving a street or putting in street trees. Affordable and mixed-income housing, safe neighborhood projects, infrastructure projects. We're particularly fond of street lighting and street signage, neighborhood beautification, economic development, working in brownfields, and then arts and entertainment opportunities. The important thing about this list that you see in front of you is that with the redevelopment plan, if that type of project is not listed in the redevelopment plan, then the CRA cannot invest money in it. So that's why these plans are very ambitious, very broad, and that's actually appropriate. Let's go to downtown. We have a downtown district, which you can see in the blue. And that's definitely the smaller district. It was established in 2004, and it's 440 acres. Now, this district was not extended. It will end or sunset at the end of its natural period at 2034. The Downtown Redevelopment Plan, this one is much more area-specific and site-specific, but it also dealt with transportation improvements, provision of parking, support of mass transit. We want to address the gateways to the downtown, make them unique, make them something that's different from the rest of the area around it. We still address deteriorated areas, environmental cleanup, historic preservation, and housing of different types. Okay, I'm going to ask Lou Norvell from our legal staff to come up and talk a little bit about how CRAs are funded.
Good evening, Lou Norvell with the City Attorney's Office. So how is the CRA funded? The CRA is funded by ad valorem property taxes. Under the statute, the CRA portion is that amount that's the increase in property values above a baseline value. The baseline is established when the district is created. It's not an increase in property taxes, but it's a redirection. And for your CRA, the funding has been addressed or modified by interlocal agreements with the county. There is no contribution to the TIF from the school board or from the school board taxes. In the greater Frenchtown Southside district, TIF funding is set by interlocal agreement, and currently the county contributes the same millage as the city. In the downtown district, the city contributes its millage above the baseline, and the county contributes 1.154 times the city ad valorem rate. There is a cap that can't exceed, the county's contribution cannot exceed 4.2698 mils. The county contribution in the downtown district ends in fiscal year 2023, but after 2023, the county will provide funding for 3 projects: Cascades, Washington Square, and 440 North Monroe, or the site of the Envision Credit Union. Under the statute, there are some things that cannot be paid for with TIF. The statute provides that TIF cannot be used for construction or expansion of administrative building for public bodies or police and fire. There's an exception if the taxing authorities agree or if it's part of community policing. The TIF funding cannot be used for general government operating expenses unrelating to planning and carrying out the community redevelopment plan. And then third, the TIF funding cannot be used for capital improvements or projects previously on the CIP. There is an exception, projects that have been removed for at least 3 years from the CIP. I'm going to talk briefly about the CRA Board. By interlocal agreement, the members of the Tallahassee City Commission, you all currently sit as the CRA Board of Commissioners. The board composition has changed over the history of the agency. Originally, it was a 7-member board. In 2007, you went to a 9-member board, which included 4 members of the county commission. And it was in 2018 that it reverted back, or it changed to the 5-member board, which is its current composition. The CRA does not have formal bylaws. There are a number of matters that are addressed by state statute. For instance, the state statute sets out the quorum, which is a majority of the board, or currently 3. Action of the board is by the majority of those members present. Historically, this board has generally followed Robert's Rules of Order, adopts its own annual meeting schedule, and the board annually elects a chairperson and a vice chair. And I will turn it back over to Roxanne.
Okay,
Let's talk a little bit about citizen engagement. The Florida statutes do direct local governments to provide for citizen engagement or citizen comment. One of the things that we're sort of proud of in Tallahassee is that while CRAs in some parts of the state do not have citizen advisory committees, we have two. We have one for each district, and they are a very active part of both planning and reviewing and looking at all the different things that are going on in their district. More importantly, however, we also put a lot of work into making workshops like this possible, having comment sections, public comment at all of our CAC meetings and certainly all of our CRA board meetings. In 2017, we were able to start televising the meetings to sort of reach out to an even broader audience. So we think it's important to keep the folks in our districts engaged. One of the things we also do is not only do we want to keep them engaged, we want to keep them informed, because that's very important to effective engagement. We've actually recently, I think within the last year and a half, started sending out an email to citizens who've signed up for it, who then basically let them know what type of development is going on in their area, in their district, even if it's not a CRA development, because we found out that people were really concerned. They'd see something start to take shape on a project and they didn't know who's building it, what it is, and they weren't sure where to go to get that information. So, you know, we just thought we'd go ahead and provide that for them. Okay, next slide. CRA staff. We have a staff of 5, 4 of which are professional staff, 1 is admin. We like our small staff because we want to keep our expenditures for salaries and benefits down, because every dollar that we put toward anything that isn't a project is a little bit of a wasted opportunity for us. So we do keep our staff very small. The state statutes basically spell out what a CRA board and what an agency can do in terms of hiring staff, hiring consultants or other agents and employees if needed, and that power goes through the CRA board. The CRA typically acts as an agent, the agency acts as an agent of the CRA board, and we take our direction and our guidance from the CRA board unless it has been otherwise delegated. Now, Tallahassee, and I'm going to go into this, right now the city manager provides management and oversight of CRA staff through an assistant city manager. That's one structure. In September 12, 2018, the former CRA board reviewed an ordinance, or not an ordinance, but an agenda item that gave the board the authority to delegate to the city manager management of the CRA staff and agency. Okay, next. Will you advance that? What is wrong? Okay, good. So, given that you know how we're funded, who we are, how many of us are working on this, let's talk a little bit about what we do and what we've done. What I'm going to do is basically give you some results from the redevelopment activity that we've been engaging in for the past 18 years. This little graphic in front of you is a good example of one of the things that we try to achieve when we're doing redevelopment. Ultimately, if you look at the projects with the red star, there are quite a few of those. They were on both sides of Gain Street. One important thing to know about Gain Street is that the north side of Gain Street is in the downtown district. The south side of Gain Street is in the Frenchtown South Side district. So when they drew those boundaries back in '98, they were very smart because they took one of the most, profitable districts and sort of gave that to both different CRA districts, and that was a really good choice. One of the things about this that's very interesting, and I'm going to go into the numbers in a second, if you look at the projects without the red star, those are some substantial projects that are coming in, And those are projects that don't request any support or any funding from the CRA. So one of our goals is to start redeveloping an area, but get it to the point where it is desirable enough that developers are willing to come in and put their money into it without us having to give it any support. And fortunately, you know, Gain Street is there. That was probably sort of our dream scenario. So the next slide is a chart that we found fascinating. And basically what we did, in order to measure development impact or redevelopment impact, one of our key measures is how much did you raise the property value when you redeveloped a piece of property. Because the overarching goal of a CRA is to go in and do redevelopment. And it's not so that it'll be pretty or that, you know, we'll have more restaurants. That's not the point. The point is to raise the quality of the area and the property value so that when the CRA goes away, and they always go away, and that's a good thing, when the CRA goes away, the city and the county can benefit from a very concentrated, higher level of property value. So one of the things we did was we took our 12 large projects that are built, and the list is down the side that started back in 2006. And we looked at the value of the property before redevelopment and the value after redevelopment. We also looked at how much did the CRA invest in these projects and how much did the private sector invest. So let's start out with how much was invested. For these 12 projects, the CRA invested $14.5 million. And that's a lot of money for us because we were starting out and we didn't have a lot of money. But we invested it in specific components in these projects that make the project better, whether it was wider sidewalks, more parking, retail on the ground floor. And what we did was we essentially supported $229 million in private investment. And the reason this number is so important is because so many times people think that, oh, the CRA, you know, you're writing a check to some developer and they take it back to Omaha and we never see that money. When the reality is the money that the CRA is investing in these projects goes toward physical components that can be used by the public, but we're also supporting some people, whether they're local or from out of town, coming in and putting $229 million of their money into our economy to pay the plumbers and the bricklayers and to buy, you know, burgers for everybody on a Friday. That's a pretty good return on our $14 million. So we looked at the property, the 11 parcels that are, or 12, that are represented by these projects. And before development, all 12 of those properties were valued at $11 million. And that's a lot. You know, it's in the downtown and other parts of Frenchtown. It's a lot of money. But post-development, and this is the number that we always watch for, post-development, it was $190 million of value that had been created by these 12 projects. The reason that number is important is because that is the number that the property taxes will be taken off of. And that's the money that will come back into the CRA to do more projects and also eventually back into the city to do their work as well when the CRA goes away. So that's a good example of why we do the work we do and what kind of return we like to try and get on large projects. But there were only 12 of those. The interesting thing is on the next slide, we have another chart because we know you guys like numbers. But this chart, when it comes up, will show you how many projects we've done, where they are. And I can just give you a quick overview of that. We looked at the Greater Frenchtown Southside District, and to date, we've done 206 projects in the Greater Frenchtown Southside District, 206. Only a few of them, like maybe 6 of those, were large projects. The rest of them were the small projects like the business facility grant, the community projects, that kind of thing. We invested $24.8 million into those 206 projects. So, and you know, Frenchtown Southside is a very large district. I would expect that number to be higher. It should be higher. So for the downtown district, we've done 127 projects, and we've invested $13 million into those projects. So that should sort of give you an idea about, where the money is going to, how it's being spent, and what kind of impact that we're looking for. You can't stop it? Okay. They're having digital problems here. They're going to have to restart the PowerPoint. But we're going to go ahead and keep going because we've got a long presentation, and they'll go ahead and take care of that. So we've talked about how we invested our money, where the money came from, what is it? It's tax increment money, right? One of the cool things about a CRA, and residents don't realize this, is that when you draw that little boundary, what you're saying and what the city is effectively doing is they're saying, okay, this area is special, and all of the tax revenue, the increment that's generated in this area, stays in this area. The city can't take it and move it across town to build a sidewalk in somebody's neighborhood you may not even know. It has to be spent in that area. And that goes on for the 35-year life or 40-year life of the CRA. So think about it. Over time, that's a lot of money that will be invested in a very specific area. Microphone? Okay, so each year, one of the things that people don't realize is that when we started the CRA, we started out with zero. You start out your base year with nothing, and the money that we had to use for anything was actually given by the city and the county, and it was just a little bit of money. But the CRA's job at that point becomes to invest in projects and build up the revenue so that you can do the work you want to do later on. Right now, for the greater Frenchtown Southside District, we have $2.2 million a year in TIF revenue, and that's pretty good. We can use that for a lot of different projects. We also try to leverage that with other people's money. The downtown district has $2.1 million, and those numbers can go up if the property value goes up. Those numbers can go down. And one reason that we're very careful in Tallahassee with our CRA funding, we have not borrowed, we have not bonded. The reason we did not do that is because the economic situation nationally has been a little shaky for quite a while. And when the property values started to go south in 2008, 2009, our revenue went way down. And there were a couple of years where we weren't sure how much money we would have to do anything with, so we do try to be especially careful about that. And that, Sherry's next.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll discuss the projects that we work on from their small, large, and community projects.
Sherry, could you just give us your name for the record, please?
Sherry Curtis, CRA Principal Planner.
Thank you.
Since the inception of the CRA, we have supported over 300 projects in both the Greater Frenchtown Southside District as well as the Downtown District. Our small projects include our small projects as well as our large redevelopment projects are projects that we look at post-development and redevelopment values. So for our small-scale projects, those projects, we look at post-development value of less than $2 million. I think we're back with our PowerPoint, so let's see if we can get us. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. So now we are, thank you. So for our small-scale redevelopment projects, we look at projects that have a value of less than $2 million in their post-development stage. So they include commercial development projects, usually mixed-use development projects. We look at affordable housing projects, infrastructure projects, as well as events, something that we recently approved for promotion of special events as well as some of our large events. To date, we've done over 56 projects in the Greater Frenchtown Southside Development Area. That gives us about $1.7 million in total grant funds. And we have a couple examples of our small-scale projects for you. So this is our Early's Kitchen. It's one of our small-scale projects. Early's Kitchen's received about $29,000 in commercial facade dollars, and this is a before picture. And this is what it looks like today. And for those of us that have visited Early's Kitchen on South Monroe Street. So this is one of the small-scale projects that we're very proud of. And in addition to Early's Kitchen, there are some other small-scale projects, such as Happy Motoring. There's a $5 barbecue that we recently invested in. The other scale projects that we look at are our large-scale projects. And I'm just going to get back to my notes. And our large-scale redevelopment projects looks at projects that are more than $2 million in excess of their post-development value. And those projects consist of mixed-use commercial development projects with residential uses as well. We also, to date, have done 11 to 12 large-scale projects. If there are 11 projects, if you look at the block and the deck as one project, there are 12 if you look at them two separate projects. So we look at 11 to 12 large-scale projects that we've done in the Greater Frenchtown Southside District, totaling about $8.3 million in grant funds. The large-scale projects are, like I said, the block and the deck is one. 4 Point Sheraton, the block and the deck. This is a rendering of the block and the deck. The block and the deck, we've put about $5.6 million of CRA assistance in the block and the deck projects. And then there's also 440 North, which is a project that was recently approved last September, December. We're looking at providing $4.3 million in TIF reimbursement for the 440 North project, and that's another one of our large-scale redevelopment projects. College Town is another large-scale redevelopment project that we've invested about $2.5 million in College Town, and that's in our downtown district. And so and a lot of people are confused in terms of where the district separates on Gaines Street. And so for the south side of Gaines Street is in our Greater Frenchtown Southside District, and on the north side of Gaines Street is our downtown district. So for the block and the deck, our large-scale project, that's in the Greater Frenchtown Southside District because it's on the south side of Gaines Street. And College Town, the Catalyst, other projects that we've invested in large scale on the north side of Gaines Street is in our downtown district. And another project that we do are community projects. So these are our not-for-profit organizations that come to the CRA looking for financial assistance with whether it be usually exterior improvements. These projects do not show a return as far as TIF financing in terms of return on our financing that way, but they do have a huge community benefit to the public. So our community projects are about 13 that we have approved to date in the Greater Frenchtown Southside District that is estimated about $4 million in grant funds. I believe we have a picture of the Frenchtown Heritage Marketplace. Frenchtown Heritage Marketplace received over $500,000 in CRA assistance, and that would include interior as well as exterior improvements. It's the farmers market in the area, and it also has a commercial kitchen for entrepreneurial development. Next is another one of our community projects, which is the NAACP building that's located on Brevard Street. This building, the CRA assisted about $200,000 for exterior improvements to this building. Another one of our community projects is the Providence Community Center, the Delta Kappa Omega Providence Community Center. And the CRA provided about $674,000 into the construction of this facility, and this is located in the Providence community on Highland Street. And next, we'll have Devin to give you a presentation on the Frenchtown placemaking plan.
Devin Levins, Planning Department. How you doing, Commissioners?
Hey, Devin.
Just going to give you an update real quickly on what's going on in Frenchtown with Frenchtown placemaking. Some of this you've seen before, but it's always good to just have a little refresher just to know what's out there and what's happening. So projects completed so far, the bike lanes on Macomb, the traffic coming from Brevard to 4th. Art Walk is an ongoing activity that happens. There's actually going to be one coming up April 20th, just so you guys know about that coming up. Traffic counts, we have those going on right now for the Macomb and Brevard intersection to see what we can do in that area. And then housing demolitions with code enforcement, and I know you've seen some of those photos of befores and afters. This is just an image to kind of show you what's going on with the Art Walk, just to kind of give that picture of some things that are happening within the Carolina Oaks area of Frenchtown. Thought it was really interesting to be able to see that from the sky, because I know we've all seen it from the ground. Projects we have underway, we have the Frenchtown historical piece in the plaza of the Standard. Right now we're working on construction documents and getting cost estimates, and that's being funded through the sale of the land that came through the Standard property. Landmark actually put the $50,000 up for this, so that's where we're getting the funding for that project. Sign toppers, this is toppers that would go, you'll see the picture of them here on the side that say established 1824 Frenchtown. Those are to go around the historic Frenchtown area just to identify the area. We'll be working with CRA to get funding for those, and we're currently working on that right now to get the installation bids. Macomb and Brevard intersection upgrades. Again, we're taking those traffic counts. That's something that's kind of ongoing to see what the need is there, so we can actually evaluate to see what the need is. And again, that'll come before the CRA for funding once we know that need. More projects we have underway are Macomb Street crosswalks. If you remember back a couple years ago, we had funding that was set aside for the Frenchtown Gateway. I don't want to get that confused with the Gateway project that's going on, but Frenchtown Gateway being the money that we had set aside by CRA for Macomb Street to do improvements. We're going to be using some of that for crosswalks, and then we're also going to be seeking CRA funding for a residential facade improvement program that we're currently drafting now. And then projects to come, this is stuff that the group, the Frenchtown Work Group's been talking through and talking about, and I know that there's getting to be a larger conversation within the community on this. But enhancements to the streetscapes of Brevard, Macomb, and all the D streets is something that they want to bring before the CRA at some point. An affordable housing initiative, acquisition of potential sites within the area for CRA to purchase to do investment on. And then other projects that the group identifies and these other groups that are coming forward, working with the working group. They'll have multiple projects that'll be coming out over the next couple of years.
Devin, could you talk about the working group and what the composition of that group is and what their mission is?
Sure, absolutely. So the Frenchtown Working Group, they've been working together for about 2 years now. They have about 10 residents. We have 10 members, some of those being residents, business owners, or other advocates within the community of Frenchtown. And they've been working diligently to help put together the Frenchtown Placemaking Plan. That plan came before the commission back in September. That plan was approved by, or accepted by the commission, I should say. And with that plan, we've been meeting now monthly continuously to come up with projects that they'll be able to bring before this board. And what you're seeing now are the projects that we have identified throughout the process, but there'll be more projects to come because they want to get bigger projects. These are just kind of the small ones that we can get started on now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Devin, could you also speak to, I understand that there was a meeting, was it last week? Not just with the working group, but with a broader group?
I was not actually at that meeting, but
Okay.
the Urban League held a meeting. I was at their first meeting that they had. The Urban League did a town hall meeting at one of the churches here in the community, and there were members of the working group at that meeting, and then additional working group members went to the second meeing. Unfortunately, I was at another meeting in Miccosukee that night.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure we have one group or multiple groups, or how we're doing this thing.
I want to be honest with you, there's multiple groups right now, and I think they're all trying to come together to see what they can do, but right now we're still got multiple people talking about different things, but trying to come together. And I know we have some folks in this room tonight. They're trying to bring those folks together.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here to update you on the Greater Bond Neighborhood First Plan. Since we last provided an update to you, we've been continuing to work with the Community Action Team on implementing the pilot project that you all approved funding for late last year. We're focusing on 2 areas. First, the residential facade program, where we are just about ready. I think we've got a final draft and a format ready to go with that. We've met with the community action team, gotten feedback from them. We're working with Michael Parker and the Tallahassee Lenders Consortium to implement that program. We expect to have the details of that finalized. We're working also in conjunction with representatives from the CRA, as we recognize that the housing facade program will likely be taking place in other neighborhoods as well. So we're making sure that that's a comprehensive program that'll work across the board. The linear park plans continue to come along. We've again met with the community action team. I've got some pictures in here, I think, of it. We continue to meet with the community action team on the details of that, working with Steve Schaefer and the engineering folks who are, I guess we don't have those, who are working on the details of closing in the ditch that connects the spaces from the Speed Spencer Stevens Park on the east all the way over to the west at Tallahassee Junction and the St. Mark's Trail. We're really excited about that. It's about a 2.5 block stretch, and it's a 50-foot wide linear park area that we're going to landscape. There'll be a number of amenities, porch swing, benches, water fountain. It'll be a true connection within the neighborhood to get folks more active, more engaged, and to really, I think, help activate the 2 parks that are already there. We have presented the first initial thoughts about the park, not only to the community action team, but also to the Greater Bond Neighborhood Association, and continue to work with them through the details as we proceed along. The biggest thing that, obviously the biggest piece is the infrastructure piece with engineering. And as they continue to formalize their plans, that will help specify the timeline, because obviously we can't build a park until they get that ditch covered up for us. We are also, while we're working on these pilot programs, we're also proceeding ahead with the plan in general. Obviously, implementing and prioritizing all the components that were identified in the plan is very important, and we're working through those. We've completed, or almost completed, a survey of the key corridor streets in the neighborhood to look at the opportunities for streetscape, lighting enhancements, sidewalks, things of that nature. Obviously, the housing facade program will be expanded past just the initial pilot program area. And so we're excited about the plans that we've got in place, and we have a meeting scheduled on the 23rd of this month for the entire community to update them on the plans, continue to get feedback as we move forward. Future neighborhood plans, we are about a third of the way through the plan with Griffin Heights. We hope after that to move into the South City area. And obviously, there's a number of other neighborhoods that are very interested in the process, and we look forward to working with them in the future as well.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you, Ashley. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners and CRA Board. I'm Sheila Thompson-Williams, Program Planner with the CRA. To me, I get the exciting part to talk about, I think, one of the things that's most important. It is the application or funding requests or the ask and the review process. What I'd like to do is I can just shorten that, how to get the funding. First, you would just contact a CRA staff member, and that you can do that by any means necessary. You can do that a plethora of ways. You can call our main CRA phone number of 850-891-8357. You can do 8352, 8353, 8354, 8355, and that's me, or 8356. Also, you can email us at our main CRA email of cra@talgov.com. You can mention to a staff member at any CRA meeting, CAT meeting, DRC meeting, or even just out and about in the community that you want to inquire about CRA funding. From there, what staff will do is we will coordinate a meeting to go over what the particular application process may be based off of what funding you're wanting and what your idea is for funding. From there, we'll help you with any applicable applications or deliverables that will be necessary based upon the funding option that is most suitable for what it is an individual is wanting funding for. We have the Business Facility Improvement Program, we have the Promotional and Special Event Grants, we have large-scale funding, and other. For the greater Southside District, Greater Frenchtown Southside District, the funding request, and we're kind of following the chart here, funding request, and I'm at about the third step. The funding request for funding does go to our Citizens Advisory Committee for introduction, and we look to the CAC Advisory Committee to give us a recommendation for funding requests in excess of $10,000 to then be forwarded to the CRA Board for actual disposition on any funding requests in excess of that amount. I'm saying funding amounts in excess of $10,000 because funding requests under $10,000, our CRA Executive Director does have the discretion to make a disposition, which means, of course, approve or deny such request. After that, funds for over $10,000, like I mentioned, do go to the CRA Board for disposition depending on the process. If it's just an application process under like our business facility improvement, staff does an agenda item. We do application summary and staff report for those. Those requests do not, because they fall under a program, do not require a development order. Fundings that are outside of that program, like the larger scale fundings, do require that a redevelopment order is done. Staff works with the applicant once the CRA Board gives a disposition, a positive disposition of approval on amounts outside of a program and over $10,000. We'll work with the applicant on the redevelopment order, and then we allow the applicant to proceed with construction and doing their project. So similar process for the downtown district. The only differential is for the downtown CRA district, the entity that we get recommendation from is the Downtown Redevelopment Committee. It's the DRC, not to be confused with Growth Management, it's DRC though. Downtown Redevelopment Committee. So I didn't figure out how to do the clicker, so let's see if I can appropriately do the clicker. Okay, so I kind of went over what's there on the slide about working with staff, and we do help coordinate with other departments, especially for our smaller scale applicants or developers. Staff really does work with them through any processes. A lot of times when we're talking to applicants about CRA funding, lots of other things come up. So we act as a sounding board, and we help facilitate any additional concerns that an applicant may have, in addition to what falls under the purview of the CRA funding. And we do, like it says, we do help monitor each project to ensure that various conditions are met. So the next slide was very exciting. This is our business facility improvement program for the Greater Frenchtown Southside. We call that the BFIP. It has been most recently our most popular program because about 2 to 3 years ago, our CRA Board did modify that program just a tad, and they allowed for the first $10,000 of grant funding that an applicant would need to be given, so to speak, at gratis, provided that you were doing improvements that fell under items that we could fund. Things that funding will not go towards, cannot go towards, is any improvements to roof, any additional square footage that you're wanting to add to the building or structure, and nothing as it relates to interior improvements. But anything outside of that program, and I can kind of work with people on how to get the funding, things that are covered, new windows, doors, painting, paving, landscaping, lighting, signage. Those are the type of things. Once an applicant's funding request is in excess of $10,000, the program will allow an applicant to get up to $50,000. The first $10,000 is at what I call no match. There's no requirement for any funding from a property owner, tenant, or whoever falls within the Greater Frenchtown South Side to provide for that first $10,000. But once you want funding in excess of that, there's a requirement for $1 for $1, and we can take you all the way up to getting funding under that program of $50,000. So this slide is just a restatement of a lot of the things that Ashley said, Ms. Edwards, and that is as it relates to what we're hopeful for, or what we're starting to do as it relates to residential and neighborhood programs. Like we're talking a lot about, the business facility improvement program right now only helps fund commercial properties. So there are properties within the CRA district that are residential, and now that the CRA's funding is doing a lot better, we do now have the opportunity to create some programs that actually can help the residential property and really neighborhoods. So we're looking at a similar idea for residential to help with various things there, and we're partnering with Parks and Recreation, Neighborhood Affairs, and the housing departments to kind of help establish that program. It is not going to be income-driven. It's anticipated to start in the summer, and any information regarding that program and the application process is going to be discussed at the community will have lots of opportunity to give input. It will go to the Citizens Advisory Committee for input as well, and then to the CRA Board for final disposition on specificity that they like within that program. So with that, I am supposed to talk to Christian.
Hold on before we do that. Mr. Chair, hold on, Christian.
Hold on, Christian, just a second.
Hold on. Just want to take an opportunity, if there's questions you have
Right.
with the presentation, now's the time to do that.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner Bryan?
I have, not on this part, but in general, are we to the open session or for questions or
So no questions on the presentation of
the presentations or just this one? I'm just trying to get for
just
clarity.
this one?
Oh, okay, no.
You're good?
Yeah, until we have open conversation.
Okay, all right. I did have one question. We talked today, Roxanne, about at the last meeting, Commissioners Williams, Cox, and Bryant brought up the issue of how are we getting information out to the businesses and to the public about the programs and funds that are available through the CRA. Can you talk about what you've done since then to address that issue?
Yes, I'll be glad to. Basically, there was a question about how are you reaching out to, for example, the small businesses, how do they know you exist and your programs exist? There are several things that we do. Probably the most successful, and we're going to be starting it in probably a month. We wanted to get direction from you on how you want that program to look before we start going out to promote it. But we have flyers that we can put in, electrical bills. We have flyers that we hang on people's doors, but we also walk the street, business to business, and leave information and, talk to people about the program and invite them to come in. We're going to be hopefully working with the local media to talk more about what kind of programs and projects that we're going to be putting together. After you give us direction on where you want to go, we'll talk about this more later, but we'll come back to you at a future CRA board with the programs and, projects that you're talking about. That's what we'll use for the outreach.
Okay. Commissioner Williams, Cox.
One of the other things that was mentioned too, Roxanne, thank you for that, but we also talked about some of the funding that's available for large projects and small projects in the community. I know they've been allocated for this current fiscal year, but we talked about outreaching to churches as well so that we have a more diversified group of organizations that are getting funding for some of the large projects and some of the small projects so that we can make sure we're getting it. If you don't get it in those other places, those who want it can get it at church or rec centers or places where people actually go in large numbers.
Things like rec centers, those are things we can definitely do. I'd need to give it to a church. I would have to ask legal. I'm not sure that that's something we can do, but we'd certainly look into it.
We certainly can look into it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that for those of us who run for office, we have no problem going into churches to take information for what we want. So surely we can take information into churches to get more diverse funding opportunity, because some of the churches may be interested in doing that to support what they may have going on in the community. We just need to make sure that it's getting to all members of the community.
Oh, you're you're just saying give the information, pass it out at churches?
Yeah.
That we can, oh, absolutely. I thought you
Okay.
meant something else entirely.
Well, amen.
No, any community organization that has like more than 5 or 6 people in it, we will definitely reach out to them.
Okay.
We're also implementing things like yard signs. So when a project is under construction and it's a CRA project, it'll have our logo, it'll have our phone number, our URL down there, so people can see what kind of projects. So we're looking at a really broad range
Okay.
of outreach.
And let me go back and not just say churches, mosques, synagogues.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Everything,
Everything,
yes.
right.
Phone booths, we'll be happy to.
Be lucky to find one of those.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay. Christian, what's happening in the legislature?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. First, I just want to acknowledge Ronna Brown and Kelly Millette, and then staff Steve Bergman, who put this together, our lobbying teams here tonight, if we have any deep dive questions. In both the House and the Senate, there are proposals that continue to advance. In the Senate, one will be heard tomorrow in the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Tourism, and Economic Development. That's at 4 p.m. It's been approved in its first subcommittee, in its first committee. The House has been approved in all committees and is ready for consideration by the full chamber. The difference between the two, the Senate didn't really move at first, and then once it did, there were several amendments to it that have made it considerably less restrictive as far as its provisions go. So that's what I'm going to give you a quick overview of now. Both of the bills have several issues in common that are more or less standard practice for us, but they're really focused on transparency and good reporting. So there's ethics training, procurement process aligned with the process the local government uses, annual reporting, annual audit requirements. So there are differences, but both bills have those, and there are more in commonality. The more restrictive House provisions include a few that I wanted to put on your radar. The first prohibits the use of CRA trust fund money for activities related to festivals or street parties designed to promote tourism and or grants to nonprofit entities providing socially beneficial programs. So that's something that we've done, and that would prohibit that. In the House bill, CRA funds can only be used for a few things. So you saw a list of what they currently are used for. Here is infrastructure improvement, building construction and renovation, parking lots, parking garages, neighborhood parks, as well as grants and loans to businesses for facade improvements. That's what it has in there. The House also includes an additional 4 factors to define what blight means, and it removes the ability of the local authority to declare an area blighted with the presence of only one of those factors. So right now that might be open to you as an alternative, but you would have to have, we'd have to dive into what it says, but having just one of those definitions wouldn't be enough to declare it blighted. There are about the continuance of the CRA upon expiration. So you saw the dates of expiration here. The House bill would require a 2/3 vote of the governing board to continue. The Senate would require a majority of the board. And in any creation of a new CRA would require a 2/3 vote of the county of a general referendum during a general election. So that's a quick overview of the two. Again, the Senate seems to be moving, and it's also being heard tomorrow, and it is the less restrictive. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Christian? Okay, thank you. Christian, keep us abreast of what's going on and anything that we might need to do.
We'll keep tracking it. We'll keep tracking it, and we'll continue in our weekly updates.
Okay. All right. Okay. We are at the portion of the agenda where we will take comments from the public. Again, if you haven't and you'd like to address the board, there are speaker cards on the back table. If you would complete those, each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. And when you come up, if you would give us your name and address for the record, please. Mr. Assistant City Manager.
We'll let Sheila do the introductions.
Okay.
Mr. CRA Board Chair, at this time right now, I have 11 speaker cards, with our
Okay.
first speaker being Mr. K. Lenoris Barber. Followed behind him would be Mr. Robert Keenan. Please, your name and address for the record, sir, and you have 3 minutes.
Kayla Norris Barber, 650 West Brevard Street. Boy, I have a list of things. I need more than 3 minutes. I really do. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to Frenchtown. You're sitting in the auditorium, really, of a high school that I graduated from. And I see a whole host of other fighting tigers in the room. But the strange thing about it is, you are not in the CIA. You're in the middle of Frenchtown, but you're not in the CRA. Everybody? I don't know. This is not part of the CRA. Our baseball and football field, which was Lee Park, is not in the CRA. But strangely enough, Gaines Street is in the CRA for Frenchtown. That's what I call the ultimate definition of gerrymandering. But anyway, restructuring the CRA board to include 2 citizens on the board of CRA commissioners. The Florida statute supports it. It's applicable. We'd like to see it happen. So the CRA and the City Commission are 2 separate and distinct organizations, and really the CRA director should report directly to the board of CRA commissioners. That additional level of management in the middle, I think, complicates things. And plus, you guys have conflicting policy agendas when you're the CRA board and when you're the City Commission. I think 2 citizens on that commission would balance that. Performance measurement system for the CRA. They measure what they're doing, but we don't think they're doing the right thing. So what they're measuring is not the proper thing. What they should be measuring is what's in the redevelopment plan. For instance, the redevelopment plan says that they will do 500 single-family affordable homes. They haven't come close to doing anything like 20. I saw a slide that there was 35 affordable homes. I want to know where they are. I have not seen them. So the visual on the ground does not support that. CRA has the ability to apply for grants. They have the ability to do TIF financing. We haven't done those things. I heard an explanation of why we haven't done TIF financing. Maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's not. But applying for grants, there are a whole host of grants out there that the CRA should be applying for. Probably the reason why they don't, because the conflict between the CRA board and the City Commission. Blocking debt, parking arrangement. I have a simple question. I don't know the answer to it. Are we making money off that deal? I just haven't found any.
Mr. Barber, you have 30 additional seconds.
I got 100 more items.
In 30 seconds.
All right, hold on. Large events. Large events are only done in the downtown district. I think it's very partial to not have large events being done in the Frenchtown South Side district. It's just biased. Promotional events are, in the downtown district, is managed by the Downtown Improvement Authority. But for Frenchtown, they're managed by staff. And then the cap for downtown is larger than the cap for Frenchtown. When CRA has unexpended funds, I want to make sure I be real clear about this one. When the administration has unexpended funds, they give the majority of it to the downtown district rather than the Frenchtown. But when they budget expenses for the Frenchtown district, they give the lion's share of those expenses to Frenchtown, not to downtown. There's this disparity, and there's something with the allocation process there. EMS reimbursements. And you have an ordinance say that the downtown district should pay for emergency management for the MSTU for the county, to reimburse the county for it. But downtown doesn't reimburse. Guess who reimburses? Frenchtown.
Okay, Mr. Barber, if you could begin to conclude your remarks.
The presentation on the redevelopment plan is very misleading. The order of the projects, or the other things that were in the redevelopment plan is totally out of order. So that plan, economic development was one, and affordable housing was two. Those were the top priorities. What I saw was transportation and beautification, a whole bunch of other stuff that came before those two items. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming out this evening.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Mr. Barber, since you have 100 items, we don't want you to take those back home. Could you please
You know what?
provide you don't have to provide it tonight.
I do have it.
Okay, but if you would provide that, a copy for the commission, or provide it where we can get a copy of it.
I like it. Is the clerk present?
Who's that?
The clerk. So I can give those documents to the
He
clerk.
is, but you can, the city manager is here, his staff is here.
All right.
And
So I'd
Commissioner-
like to make this a part of the record. And I'd also add that actually these documents that I'm giving the city manager, I actually mailed to
Yes.
the city commission, or the CRA Board of Commissioners. And I didn't mail them to you because you're the chairman, and I was trying to get a meeting with you. So I emailed you those documents, but the rest of them, I put them in the mail.
Okay.
Okay,
And I
thank
did
you.
ask Assistant City Manager Tedder to take notes so that we can
Okay.
respond to issues that are raised. So thank you, Mr. Barber, for sharing that information with us, and we will get you answers to the issues that you've raised.
And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I was taking notes as well, and I wanted to touch a point that Mr. Barber mentioned. One of the reasons why we've had this conversation with the executive director is to get the information more widespread in the community, because in order to get the large event funding, you have to apply for it.
Right.
And what we have not had is applicants. And so when we saw that at the last CRA meeting, I'm sorry, but when at the last CRA meeting, that's why and you were there, that's why we asked that we do a more outreach to get the information in the hands of people so that we can get them.
That's accurate. I think that large events are only downtown only downtown qualify for large events because they tied it to tourism, I think, which makes no sense to me.
Okay, we can look into that. We can look into that. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and go to our next speaker, because I want to make sure we have time reserved for board discussion. Our next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker I have as Robert Keenan, followed by Mr. Max Epstein. Name and address for the record, sir.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Keenan. How you doing?
Good evening.
Commissioners, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak to you today.
Okay.
My name is Bob Keenan. I'm owner of Cornucopia Wealth Management, a wealth management company located
Mr. Keenan,
on
could you speak more?
Brevard Street,
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
which manages over $20 million in clients' money, and been on Brevard Street for the last 38 years. I'm also the chairperson of the Tallahassee NAACP Economic Development Committee. First, I want to thank you commissioners for coming out in the community and coming out in the community at 6 o'clock. For many, many years, we've tried to get the CRA to come out and meet with us and also at a decent hour. So I certainly want to thank you for taking that step. Third is, I want you to know that the information that you have received today is strictly information from the staff of the city of Tallahassee. This is not from the community of the city of Tallahassee. There are many people who have not had input in the decision-making process here. For an example, the business persons in the business community, including myself, including the economy drug, the Urban League, and organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League. Also, we have not had input from residents, particularly the renters and the homeowners. So I'm suggesting that you reach out to the community and find out really what the needs of the community is in terms of making decisions going forward with regard to the community economic, with regard to the CRA. Also, you will notice in your handouts that you don't have a copy of the community, the CRA redevelopment plan. And to me, that's a big question as to why you don't have it. I have some idea, but by the same token here again, I think you gave selective information by the staff, and you're not getting all the information that should be to your disposal. And going forward, I'd like to suggest that we have a citizen-driven program as opposed to a staff-driven program for the community economic, for the CRA. And that is to include the folks not only in Frenchtown, but also the people in Southside. You know, there's a lot of what do you call it? Pushing black folks and poor folks out of the community. We got a name for it. What do we call it?
Mr. Keenan, you have 30 seconds left.
What do we call it?
Gentrification.
Gentrification. There's a lot of gentrification taking place in this community. And you know, you probably wonder where the black folks who were here but not here, you know, you might drive down my street, West Brevard Street, and you'll see some. You might go over there by where the fish place on Brevard Street, and you might find some of my friends and my colleagues. So I'm asking you as the CRA to reach out in the community. We have answers, you know. If I've been in business for 38 years there on Brevard Street, hiring probably over, 100 students, I must know something. Also, I'm going to suggest that there are other resources in the community, such as the universities and other private businesses, that we can bring to the forefront to help address some of these ideas. So I'm asking you, as the CRA agency, to reach out and bring this community together. I don't know how many years I've listened at you and other folks on the TV about how can we get jobs, and then we come up with this idea of trying to bring somebody in and create jobs, and that never happened. We got folks in this town that got skills and are motivated.
Mr. Keenan, could you begin to
actually give us some consideration in terms of changing the focus in the direction of the CRA? Appreciate it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keenan. Thank you for coming out, and we will make sure that staff reaches out to you to get you involved in that process. Thank you. Our next speaker.
Thank you. We should have Mr. Max Epstein and followed by Mr. Curtis Taylor. Your name and address, sir, for the record.
My name is Max Epstein. I live at 1001 San Luis Road. I'm the owner of Tallahassee Glassworks, Leon County's only hot glass studio. I participated in the CRA Call to Arts program last year. I'm here to talk about two things and represent the arts here. During that process, there were 2 pre-meetings and 3 review meetings for the applicants who applied for the performing arts funding. My first comment is none of the CRA board members or the city commissioners attended any of those meetings to my knowledge. And several of the goals and the stated needs of the project were, going off track a little bit here.
Yeah, take time.
At the beginning of that process, there were several, this is very emotional for me because I put a lot of hard work into this process, and I did not feel like the arts community in general was heard at all. because none of the commissioners came out to this meeting, and there were conflicting requirements stated by the CRA staff and the commissioners once it went through these review meetings. Once it went through the first 2 pre-meetings and the 3 review meetings, it went to the TDC. And former Commissioner Maddox at that point said that he was not going to fund any project that was not a publicly owned building, which was stated very clearly by the CRA staff that it did not have to be. My group was to bring a technology and art and music learning center to Ashmore's here in Frenchtown. And our goal was to extend the art walk all the way down Brevard Street to the lake there and help bring some arts into this community. And I've really been trying to relocate my business either to Frenchtown or the south side to better serve the community. And the CRA staff recommended our project as the number 2 spot to be funded. And instead, it went to the TLH Arts project. And their building that is owned by the state of Florida is near where the new proof is, which is sitting empty. And their requirement to get this project going was $6 million, and the CRA awarded 1.8 of that. So that means they have a giant fundraising goal to meet, as well as Lemoyne Arts Center. And as far as I know, none of that money has been spent. I don't know what's going on. It's been almost a year. And that's really life-changing money for the arts community here.
Mr. Epstein, you have 30 more seconds.
Okay.
Please conclude your comments.
Okay, well, that building there, for example, you could have put $200,000 or $300,000 into and rented it out for $5 a square foot for someone like me or other arts groups in this town that have been priced out of the arts district. And then after 5 or 6 years, been making money and putting it back in. It just seemed like none of us were heard other than the big people. And Domi Station, which already gets the money, funding, or were the people behind this TLH Arts group. And their leader, Jay Kiker, a representative, said he had no, financial anything to gain except he owns several pieces of property right next to it. I know personally 10 or 15 of my friends who are artists and musicians have moved out of this city because there are not enough opportunities for them here. So, I'm really trying to bring the arts and have a center to learn, but it doesn't seem like I can do it here or I can get any help. I have people like Rickards High School and Lively Tech who want to help, but I can't even apply for money from the CRA for what I need if I'm moving into a new space. Painting and roof next year is great, but what I need is an updated electric panel and gas and hood for me to move in for my art. I can't apply for that. Right. So how do we help the arts community here? How do we help small businesses too? Because it seems very political, and the people at the top seem to get most of the funding.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Epstein. Thank you for coming out this evening and bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker I have is Mr. Curtis Taylor, followed by Mr. Bozeman Jackson, followed by Dr. Hollyfield. Name and address for the record, sir.
Yes. Good evening. Curtis Taylor, Tallahassee Urban League. I want to thank the commissioners for having this workshop. I think we need to have more of these. I think we really also need to have a working workshop where we're really looking at the CRA process, the do's and don'ts all the way through, because when I look at the large-scale projects and I look at the small-scale projects, the large-scale projects are doing great, but the small-scale projects, there's nothing really happening. When I look at Frenchtown, I worked at Urban League for 41 years. I can tell you now I don't see anything that's happening on Dent, Dover, Dunn, Dewey Street, they call it D blocks. I don't see anything happening there. And I can tell you now that there is a great need. When I look at the CRA, you say we can do sidewalks. No sidewalks in D block. We can do housing rehab. No real housing rehab dollars. I cannot tell you the number of houses that I've been in that because we have senior citizens on fixed income, they cannot afford to put a roof on. So it's raining in their house. They have to pull out buckets. Can you imagine fearing the rain? But we actually have citizens living in Frenchtown in deplorable conditions. And so we got to take another look at our CRA funding and the way that we're spending our dollars and try to make it possible for citizens in Frenchtown to benefit. I think everyone in here will want to save Frenchtown. Okay? And what I mean by that, if we look back 30 years ago, there was a African-American community right there where the Holding Pond is on Georgia Street. They say we need to do better drainage. They moved all those houses out and they put a pond there. And we still have drainage problems. So I don't want to see that happen to Dunn, Dent, and Dover, which can easily happen. We want to make Frenchtown a better and safer place to live. Okay? No sidewalks. That's impossible. No street lighting. We need better street lighting. Crime in our community. We need surveillance cameras. There are a host of things that we need in Frenchtown. And I guess, you know, you learn every day. I had no idea that Frenchtown went all the way down to Gaines Street. So we really need to take a look at our boundaries. I had no idea that we were spending dollars on Gaines Street, and we're saying that's the south end of Frenchtown. That's incredible. I had no idea. And so I really think we've got to take a look at the entire CRA process, and we got to bring about equality and equity when it comes to our people living in deplorable housing, living in a community where there's crime. Our citizens are being shot and killed. Living in an area where the 32304 zip code is the lowest reading level in the state of Florida. We've got to address that. We got to do better by our children. They're growing up in environments, and we wonder why we have crime.
Mr. Taylor, you can start concluding your comments.
We don't have any jobs for our people, so we wonder why they stand on the street corner. When I go to rehab Ms. Johnson's house, 2 of her children are living there because, one, they can't get a job. Secondly, if they've been incarcerated, we won't rent an apartment to them for 5 years. So we have a multitude of problems that we've got to deal with. And we've got to do a better job in utilizing our CRA funds to make a difference in our people's lives. So the Urban League is saying enough is enough. We need to do a better job by our citizens. The funds are available, and we need to make it happen, and we need to make it happen now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I want to thank the Urban League for the leadership that you all are providing now to bring those issues to the community. And I know Devin talked earlier about the fact that we're trying to bring all of the groups in the Frenchtown area together so that we can develop a plan to address those issues.
I want to thank, we have Frenchtown Neighborhood Association, we have the Green Center, the list goes on. We're getting ready to talk to Griffin Heights. And so our efforts try to pull everybody in the same tent and have the same goal and the same voice, and that is to save Frenchtown, make Frenchtown better, and a safer place to live for our children.
Okay. Thank you so much. Our next speaker.
Thank you. I have Mr. Bozeman Jackson, followed by Dr. Hollyfield, then followed by Mr. Mark McMillan.
Is that Bozeman Jackson or Boss Man?
Boss Man.
Boss Man Jackson.
Okay.
That's it, yeah.
Goes. O'Neill?
Yeah, he's here. Oh, he was here. Is he here? He must have left. He must have left. I know he was here earlier. Okay, our next speaker, if he comes back, we'll make sure he.
Right. Thank you.
Our next speaker.
Next speaker I have is Dr. Hollyfield, followed by Mr. Mark McMillan, then Irene Holden.
Good evening, Dr. Hollyfield.
Good evening, Curtis.
Thank you, Ed.
I don't know where to start. I really don't. But I tell you, Matt, you really cracked me up. I love the fact that you walked out of that meeting at Greenville, which was a waste of time. It really was. Do y'all know anything about Greenville? Cradle of the Confederacy. Wasn't South Carolina the first state to secede from the Union? If I recall, Greenville, South Carolina. I looked into Greenville a little bit, Curtis. I don't know why y'all went up there. I really don't. Let me tell you about Greenville. Greenville has a higher level of income inequality than Tallahassee, Leon County. So did y'all go up to Greenville to learn how to become more unequal? I mean, was that the purpose of the trip? And let me tell you something else about Greenville. The black population is disappearing. Did any of y'all bother to look at the demographics of Greenville, South Carolina?
Yes, sir.
Not that long ago, it was more than 30%. Now it's less than 30%. The blacks are leaving. They're being gentrified out of existence. And I think the reason the chamber wanted to go to Greenville was to plot the same course in Tallahassee, to get all the black folks out of Frenchtown, with all of the gentrification that's taking place. And Curtis, I don't see how you're so enthusiastic about what's happening with the CRA. The best thing the CRA could do is disappear. It's a corrupt entity. It just needs to go. If you look at the CRA staff and the decision-makers on the CRA staff, well, yeah, Roxanne makes, what, $120,000 a year? But all of the people in decision-making positions on the CRA staff are white. You know that, Diane? Every single one of them. The blacks don't make any money on the CRA staff. That's Rick McGraw, Roxanne, all of the highest wage people on the CRA staff are white. So what message does that send? I think there's Jim Crow on the CRA staff. I know, Curtis, I know Jim Crow very well. I went to FAMU DRS under Jim Crow. So I know about Jim Crow. And we give money that even Scott Maddox says don't make no sense. Like when y'all gave $1.5 million to Big Ben Cares, there is no TIF. There is no tax increment financing. And then they turn around and start calling the police on black people. The police are going to be very busy with this gentrification, because the first thing the police do when whites gentrify is to start calling the police on black people. I've had the police called on me by Big Ben Cares. I had either police called on me or threatened with the police 2 times in a 6-month period. But Curtis, you probably think I belong in jail anyhow.
You should have said that.
Is that right, Curtis? You think the rightful place for me? After all, your buddy Roxanne, she won't even call me doc. She says, I don't deserve to be called doctor.
I do.
I don't deserve to be called doctor. So they take your money, they call the police on you, they insult you. I paid Roxanne $120,000 a year to insult me. Think about that, Curtis. $120,000 of my tax dollars only to be insulted by Roxanne and the CRA. You up there grinning, but that's all you do, Curtis.
Right.
So that's why I call you Grinning Curtis. But
Dr. Hollifield.
And protesting.
Dr. Hollifield.
Protesting.
Dr. Hollifield.
Why did Diane
Dr. Hollifield, if your intent
yes.
is to belittle anybody on this board, then I'm going to cut your microphone off.
You could do better. You could call the police on me, Curtis. I've already been threatened.
I have asked you. I respect you, Dr. Hollifield. I respect you, Dr. Hollifield, when you don't respect me. But there's only so much I'm going to take.
I'm supposed to get 3 minutes, right?
You will have 3 minutes, Dr. Hollifield.
I want my time added. And the other thing is, all this thing about this development agreement and the sabotage of the development agreement, the land that comes back to the Frenchtown CRA is going to have a ton of restrictions on it. And why is that? They can even put up a retail pharmacy on that land that comes back. I'll tell you what the program is, Curtis. It's to devalue that land that comes back to the Frenchtown CRA. Because then they can sell it to developers for nothing. And all the purpose of the CRA is white gentrification. Make no mistake about it.
There's 6 minutes, Dr. Holyfield.
Okay,
all right, well,
if
one
you
more
would
point.
begin to
One more
conclude
point.
your remarks, please.
Okay, one more point. Jeffrey Pope, we're talking about HIV. Even Donald Trump is talking about HIV now. Did you know that, Curtis? You ever looked up the data for HIV in Leon County? About 90% of the people in Leon County who die from HIV are black.
Okay, Dr.
About
Holyfield, if you would
90%.
conclude your remarks, please.
Are black. So all I'm saying is we need to understand what's going on here. The black community is being raped financially. We get all these cigarette companies. Why did the CRA invest in subsidize tobacco? You subsidize it.
If you would start to conclude your remarks, please, Dr.
Smoke
Holyfield.
City. Why is the CRA subsidizing?
If you
sale
would
of
start to
tobacco
conclude your
products
remarks,
in
please,
the
Dr.
black
Holyfield.
community?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, please.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Mark McMillan, followed by Irene Holden, followed by Mr. Bill Wilson, please. Name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Reverend Mark McMillan.
Good evening, Reverend.
And I live on the corner of Dewey and Dunn, 659 Dunn Street, right there on the corner on that two-story house. And my wife and I, we bought that house about a little over 2 years ago. And since then, we knew what we were moving into, but I do question a couple of things, and that is cameras in that community. Over in that community, and the reason I'm talking about cameras, I would like for cameras to be put up and down that street. Now, I may have a few people that disagree with me, but I've seen the effect. I have 8 cameras around my house, and when I moved in that community, there was drug activity on that corner. I walk out the door and I say, "I'm filming you." That they leave it. They take it farther down the road, and I brought this issue up in the when the Urban League had the meeting at Watson Temple, and remember Major, the police officer right there, he was there, and we were talking about the same thing, about putting cameras up and down that street, because they hang out, they're there all times of the night, and of course they call my house the police house, because as I told him, they think all my films go straight to the police department, and I let them think that. I don't think, tell them nothing different. But I seen the effect of it, and I think it'll be something great to help, clean up a lot of the riffraff in the community. Also, we're right across the street also from the CCYS children's house there, and they put a light up maybe about 3 weeks ago, a street light there. Wonderful, bright, one of the newer lights evidently, and I would, love for those lights to be up and down that street to light up everything that's going on, because we know more evil lurketh in the dark. So if there's more light, they're going to, pull away. Another thing, there's so many abandoned houses, and you all talk about redevelopment, and that's another question. We have abandoned houses all in that community, and we know that there's absentee landlords there, but we know that anything people want to do, you all will do it. And I know that there's a way for those things to be, those issues to be resolved. I don't know, also more sidewalks in the community. So because I see young kids walking down those streets there, and they're right there in the streets. There's a sidewalk right there in front of my house, but as you pass Dunn Street, walking down Dewey Street there. There's no sidewalk, and watching those kids walk up and down that street. And if you know the community, you know everybody is not of a sane mind coming through there. You know, some are intoxicated, some are on drugs, and you know, these are just issues that has crossed my mind. But I wonder, you know, could that be something that you all would look into?
Oh, yes.
And because I think it would be so beneficial for the community, and it would help clean up a lot of what's going on there in the community. My wife and I, we have an outreach ministry, Divine Revelations Ministry, which is a 501c3, but we're a charitable donation, and we do a lot of prison ministry. So I'm always out there. I'm always talking to them. I'm always, you know, I even feed some of them. But the thing is, I would love for it to be, you know, just not me. My community, I notice that I'm by myself. My neighbors, they don't input. And when I moved there, I wondered why the neighbors didn't input and get involved. It's because they have grandchildren. They have children. They have friends. They're all involved too. So it's like my wife and I, sometimes I feel that we're standing alone there. But we can get some cameras up and down there. We're good.
Okay. Reverend McMillan, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Mr. Chair, Reverend McMillan.
Reverend.
Are you working with any of the other neighborhood groups that are, you know, because the D Block is a part of the Frenchtown project. I'm hearing the Urban League mention it, the Frenchtown Neighborhood Association, and a working group. Are you involved with any of those groups?
No, my wife, we were just talking about getting involved even more with those groups.
Okay. Because then you won't be alone.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, and there's, you know, together we can work this, but it's hard to work over here, work over here, work over here.
Right.
If we come together with a plan that we can actually execute and measure how we get it done, we can get it done together, I believe.
Okay.
So I encourage you to get with the folks who Jim Bellamy, Curtis Taylor, Rudy Ferguson, and others, Annie Harris, many others.
I am working with Pastor Ferguson.
Okay, so we need to come together so we can have a plan.
All right. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Irene Holden, followed by Mr. Bill Wilson, followed by Mr. Jim Bellamy.
Good evening.
I'm Irene Nelson Holden. I live at 713 West Georgia Street, Tallahassee, Florida, 32304. I have three concerns.
Okay.
4 years ago, they put pipes down on Dewey Street and Georgia Street. A few months ago, there was more pipes on Pope and Georgia Street. My water is muddy, and I did go to the city last week to tell them they need to check it.
Okay.
The trash that comes by and pick up on Thursday morning, normally the men's get right in the front of my driveway, and I guess they pick up all the black cans, and whatever is left in the middle of the street and between 713 West Georgia Street. I have lived in my neighborhood in the 700 block since October 1964. I was at 710. I purchased 713 in 1973. Never had a problem. The trash runs down from the 800 block, and when it rains, there are mattresses, there are trash cans and everything in the middle of the street. Most time it stops. I pay $4,000 per year because you said I'm in a 5 flood damage. I pay that. I would really like for the city to go out and see what we can do, because the water all the way back now, backing up to my driveway, and when it rains. So my thing as an old lady, been in Tallahassee, I don't think I had an arrest record.
Mature.
Have 40 years with the state of Florida, and I'm at Pat Thomas now, or going my 4th year with them. So I just like for you all, as a city, and as a senior of Lincoln County, Tallahassee Florida, I'd just like for you all to have an old lady out and check that, because I do try to keep my yard presentable, so check those others for me. And I
Okay.
thank you, God.
So, Ms. Holden, so it was, the trash is not picked up? Is that what you're?
When the trucks come home,
Yes, ma'am.
they get through and some fall out, they don't pick it up. They
Oh,
go back.
okay, okay. So they're leaving trash on the street after they, okay. We can address that. And then the other issue was flooding?
The water, when they put it down on the drain, when they put the pipes down, the 16 feet that they went down, my house was muddy. The city told me they was going to come out after 3 weeks after they had gone, after 6 months.
Okay.
I had them to come pressure wash. But the Polk Street, it has been just filthy.
Oh, so the street is,
Yes, it's coming down.
when you said that, I thought you meant the water coming into your house was muddy.
Not in the house.
It's just water on the street.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we can have someone,
Okay.
Assistant City Manager?
Yes, Ms. Holden, could you give Roxanne your contact information so we can have someone reach out to you tomorrow?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Holden. Our next speaker?
Have Mr. Bill Wilson, followed by Mr. Jim Bellamy, followed by Reverend Taylor Bodo, please.
Good evening. Welcome to Frenchtown.
Good evening.
Bill Wilson, 1816 Old Fort Drive. I wanted to talk to you about some policy stuff for your future direction discussion in just a minute. Roxanne pointed out the great increase in value in the area where Frenchtown is invested. As I think previous speaker says, while we see that as great increase in value, some people see that as gentrification. And we don't typically have any kind of plan or consideration when we fund a new project of what it's going to do to the value of the property around it and how that's going to impact those citizens. And that might ought to be a part of the consideration of what we do when we fund things in the future. Second policy question I think would be worthy of your consideration is when you provide incentives for a private developer to develop rental housing, that some portion of that be set aside as affordable. We have a tremendous shortage of affordable rental in this community. The CRA has supported a huge number of rental units over the last several years, none of which are affordable. So I think that from a policy perspective, if you're going to support it financially, there should be some set aside for affordability. The third is what we're calling preservation. The Housing Leadership Council, newly forming, had their strategic planning meeting last Friday. Preservation is high on the list. And from a policy point of view, if you're funding a new development, that new development ought not displace any existing affordable housing. And a number of these developments have. So if you're going to build something and it takes out affordable units, those ought to get replaced someplace else. As part in that neighborhood, as part of that plan. So 3 things there for you to consider if you would going forward. What's the impact on gentrification of new development? Some affordable set aside in any multifamily development and preservation of existing affordable housing. The other one is clearly, I would suggest some sort of a roundtable workshop with those of us involved in the affordable housing business. We don't have a plan for how to address affordable housing, how to use the budgeted CRA money for affordable housing, how to use the city's affordable housing trust fund effectively. We have a lot of money sitting in the bank that could be put to use, and we don't have a plan for what to do with it. And I think getting the people who are involved and want to do something constructively to build some new affordable housing and having a round table and sitting down and figuring out how we do that and how we put a plan together might well be helpful. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Mr. Jim Bellamy, followed by Reverend Taylor Bolo, followed by Regina Joseph.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Frenchtown.
Thank you.
Took y'all long enough to get out here.
And not me.
Yeah, it did. And I want to reiterate something that Kenny said earlier about this not being in the CRA most people think it's awful strange when you talk about it, and you say that here Lincoln High School and 4th Avenue Rec and all, we're not sitting in the CRA. And this has been a central part of Frenchtown as long as I've been here. And I've been here a few years. I ain't gonna say how many, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, you know, I got two biases. One is I want my community to be just like the other communities, or better, okay? And I mean, I say that, but I also exhibit that, because I spent a lot of time in this community. I want to thank you all, first of all, for helping us out with the Frenchtown Heritage Market and Food Hub. We're in the process now of opening our shared kitchen. We have our license, and all that information is done. I have some cards here I want to give out to folk, which will give you our website to go into, and you can register right on the website. For those of you who don't know, the shared kitchen will be for rent, no free. I want folks to say that. I want to say that first, because we deal with food, we get people all the time coming, y'all giving away. No, we're not giving away. This is a business. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some jobs, and we're going to give some services that are not in this community right now. And we appreciate the help of a lot of our partners that's worked with us in the neighborhood. We try to work with everybody. As a matter of fact, we've been dealing with the Urban League and several other organizations to kind of pull this whole thing together so we can show as one rather than as separate entities in terms of what needs to happen. What needs to happen in this neighborhood? A whole lot of things. We know that. My problem is that in looking at the placemaking plan, we looked at all of the different studies and all of the different plans that have been gotten in this community. A lot of good stuff, but it's just good stuff on paper. It's not stuff that we've actually implemented. We need to implement some of these things, do some of these strategies, get them off of paper, and make them for real. That's what we need to be right now. We're at that stage in our community. And if y'all don't hurry up, I'll be 90. So, you know, we're going to have to deal with that and get some things done in the community. You got a lot of dedicated people in this neighborhood. I wish that you all could do something about our friends that sit on the corner down on Bavoy Street. I mean, we need to clean that up. I mean, you know, it looks bad. I don't care what nobody say. It looks bad. And don't tell me them guys down there looking for a job at the labor force, because they ain't.
Mr. Bellamy, if you can start concluding your comments, please.
I'm going to shut up in a minute. But y'all that is stand up and so I can stand up and I'm going to get you.
Yes, sir.
But really and truly, we're glad to see you all come out and visit us tonight. As like some other people, I went to high school here. I finished this high school. Was born in this neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I went to first grade here, so y'all can figure out how long that's been, a few years ago. But anyway, we need some things to get done in this neighborhood. One thing that I've identified is that y'all have given me, and I have done a lot of stuff in the community with our program right now. But right now, we're at this point where we got everything except training and operations. We need training and we need operations. We're doing stuff that we haven't done before, but in order for us to be successful, we need some kind of assistance. And I'm kind of laying that on y'all plate, and I'll come back later and talk to you about it individually. But we definitely need to do some things. But anyway, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. Thank you for the leadership that you've provided through the Frenchtown Neighborhood Improvement Authority and the Heritage Hub. We appreciate that.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Bellamy, I've had the opportunity recently. Mr. Bellamy gave me a tour of the kitchen share, and it is outstanding. The community received a grant, and he has put it to use. It is ready to operate, not for free, but it's ready. One of the things that you and I talked about is providing some training because there's a need for people to cut up vegetables, to get it to the schools and what have you, but they need training. So I know you need some training dollars, so we need to begin to think about what that looks like, because if we can prevent some more from joining a street corner by getting this training, so that we can get the fresh vegetables from the farm to the class to the schools, if we can provide this training. Also, on the Greenville trip, I had an opportunity to talk with Red Eye Coffee, and they're roasting their coffee, he told me, on the south side. So I asked him, where are you packaging it? And I told him about the kitchen share. So I'm going to try to connect you all to see if for nothing else, we can get some packaging going on over there of some local coffee. Okay? All right.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Williams-Cox. Our next speaker.
Thank you. I have Reverend Taylor Bodo, followed by Ms. Regina Joseph, followed by Dr. Jerry C.
Thank you. Reverend Taylor Bodo, 608 North Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Thank you so much for hosting this workshop tonight, Commissioners. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about the boundaries or the parameters of what the CRA does in the greater Frenchtown and Southside District. And I just want to bring to your attention a decision that was made about a year ago. I serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee. I've served on it for about 3 years. And there was a decision that was made about 9 months ago or a year ago that I just want to bring up because it left, I think, several of the CAC board members confused. And the decision was some of the CRA people were talking about they were considering expanding the Southside District. And there was 3 different areas of expansion. And there was a lively conversation about the potential expansion. And one of the things that kept coming up from both the CAC board members as well as the citizens that were there was a concern that some of these areas where they wanted to expand into were not residential, and that it was potentially going to be taking away money from blighted residential areas. And so after much lively discussion, we sort of put forth the idea of, okay, maybe Southside could be expanded, especially some of the Southside residents were saying, hey, this neighborhood could use it or that neighborhood could use it. But we put forward like a much less expanded expansion of the Southside District. And so, after much conversation, we just kind of submitted that. And we were told that it would be taken to the CRA Board. And then when it came back to us, we were just told they just decided to expand into those areas anyway. And I think that the main concern for me as a CAC board member, and I know other board members have expressed this and other citizens that went to the meetings, were 2 things. One was it really seemed like it was creating this the prospect of taking more dollars away from blighted residential areas. And potentially making these TIF dollars available to other businesses or developers when there's a lot of citizens saying, hey, we really need a lot of services and development in our residential neighborhoods. Please, let those resources come to us. So that's the major concern. I think the secondary concern is I think it just left me, I could say at least, and I think several others, with just a question as to what the purpose of the CAC is, because when we have such a lively conversation about such an important issue, and we put that forward, and then it said, hey, we're going to talk about that with the CRA board, and then they could just come back and tell us we decided to go against what you said on maybe what might have been, certainly one of the most important decisions that we've made during my whole time on the board. So I just wanted to bring those things to your attention and ask that you consider revisiting them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker.
Thank you. I have our next speaker as Regina Joseph, followed by Dr. Jerry C., and then a recall for Bossman Jackson.
Did he make it back?
Did he make it back?
I didn't see him. I didn't see him come in. But okay.
Hello? Oh, this is actually loud. Hi, my name is Regina Joseph. I live on the south side of Tallahassee.
I've been living in Tallahassee for about 6 years now, and I want to continue making this place my home, and I want to send my children to Rickards and just overall be a part of this community. The reason why I wanted to speak is, well, first I was looking at this PowerPoint over here, and it mentioned that in 2013, like $50,000 was given to Urban Outfitters, which is a very high-end store that most poor people can't afford to shop to or shop at. So I started getting kind of upset because I realized that the whole point of the CRA was that it was supposed to help with blighted areas. So I'm not entirely sure why giving money to Urban Outfitters or the DoubleTree would actually help out poor people. You know, it seems like time and time again that the CRA is showing itself to actually just be a slush fund, a fund to give more money to people who already have the money, where we're spending $2.5 million into College Town, but public broadband is bad, where, you know, our schools built before 2014 have lead, but yet we're spending all this money developing these areas. And it's really just gentrification. It's a way to kick out poor people who are already there, to raise property taxes for people who are already there, people who also don't even, you know, own their homes. And it makes sense that it was investigated by the FBI for the corruption and the cronyism. I think that the way that the CRA has ran before is absolutely just criminal. And it's really important that we see that, you know, giving $1,000 here and there to a business to paint a building, but at the same time giving millions of dollars to developers who already have money is wrong. How does giving $50,000 to Urban Outfitters help out poor people? Has there been any report at all from the CRA showing concretely that giving all this money to developers actually helps out poor people? It doesn't. So I just really urge people to really just think about the purpose of what the CRA is for. It was supposed to be helping poor communities and, you know, for areas of blight, but it's been shown time and time again that this money just goes to the people that don't need it, and it's not going to the poor people that do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Thank you for coming out this evening. Our next speaker.
Next speaker I have is Dr. Jerry C., followed by Delatry Hollinger.
Jerry C., 648 West Brevard is where my property is. I retired from FAMU, taught at the School of Business for quite some time. I still am very close to quite a few of my former students who've gone on to work in corporate industries all around the country. One young woman talked to me about her involvement with the CRA in St. Augustine. And that particular community had appointed 4 or 5 of its neighbors to be the CRA deciders. They spoke directly to the city council. Here, this particular organization decided to put in intermediaries between the people and you who make the decisions. You heard the Reverend say that at the CAC meeting, the recommendation was made and ignored. That goes on every meeting. And I've been going to these meetings for over 10 years. Now, 648 West Brevard is a block where there are quite a few businesses. It's quite busy, really. A lot of people walking on sidewalks that can barely contain their wheelchairs and whatnot. I guess my question to you is, since this is probably my, 20th time saying the same thing, when will the people for whom this money is meant going to see change? Now, mindfully, you only have CRA money because you have poor people. So the irony of the money not reaching the people who qualified the whole city for the money is one of the ugliest stories that we have to tell. And when we ride up and down Gaines Street and we look to the right or we look to the north, left, we know that these are the boundaries of Southside CRA and Frenchtown CRA. That's where our money is,
in the parking decks. They showed you that. Where's the money for the people on Dunn Street where the woman got tased because her people weren't on a sidewalk that doesn't exist? 60-year-old woman tased in the back. Remember that? They stopped the whole family because they weren't walking on the sidewalks. Here's my point to you. We have quite a few professional people who live and work in Frenchtown who are perfectly capable of handling this program. We don't need intermediaries because you're not getting the message. And you haven't gotten it for 20 years. And I've been involved with it since '04. I asked to make a proposal, Frenchtown Youth Orchestra. We were going to put together buildings, teach kids. They wouldn't even let me make it, wouldn't put me on the agenda because I owe money. Doesn't everybody in here owe money? I said, well, where are the rules? Oh, well, I don't know. There aren't any rules. They make them up as they go along. And what I'm telling you is that these people are all obstructionists. Nobody wants to say that. But they're obstructionists. And when you ride around this city and you look at the ways in which the poor people are living here, it's horrifying. And then we watch another parking lot go up. Now, the original reason was that that money that was spent would be returned in that tax increment. And we all said, okay, yeah, I got that. Hell, that was 15 years ago. We haven't seen the money. So I guess my question to you all, since some of you are new and you haven't heard this before, this is my 20th, at least 20th time saying the same thing. And I guess my question is, there's a young woman here, it's a whole other generation, and she's asking you the same thing. So I guess my question to you all is, when are you going to let the people decide? The people who live and work there. We don't need intermediaries. We got MDs.
Doctor,
we got
if you
CPAs.
could conclude your comments.
We've got money advisors. Dr. Bowie spent her whole time on that CAC asking for this building to be included in the CRA. And then they had the nerve to put in, the east side of South Monroe? Now you realize that's the same area that the FBI man was representing. You know that, right? That's the blocks. Those are the blocks he wanted. So they included that, but they can't put the school in? She asks for that every year. Every year. How's it possible this school, this building, is not in the boundary? Why is that okay? So my question to you is, after, I guess, what did I tell you, 20 years coming to this? What you gonna do about it? That's all I wanna know. What you gonna do? Because this meeting like this just kicks the can down the road. Then the next time we vote, y'all might be gone. We got to start all over again. So what I'm asking you to do is to listen to what these people, everybody said the same thing. Street lights, sidewalks, some kind of monitoring system. Let's take this community back. Let's own it again. And if you all would just do the right thing, we wouldn't have to keep saying this over and over again. Let some other folks help you get it done. Because the people I know how to get stuff done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. C. Thank you for coming this evening and sharing your comments with us. Our next speaker.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker I have is Mr. Delatry Hollinger, followed by Ms. Maisha Mitchell.
Good evening.
Good evening, Delatry.
I want to start out with saying I'm very pleased. I think it's almost 5 months, and very pleased with the commission. I'd like to touch on the recent community meetings that are being held by the Urban League, and I'm just proud of the involvement from the community. Most of the people that I see here on this evening have been involved in those meetings. The initial meeting took place on February the 28th, which was the town hall meeting at Watson Temple. Then the first planning meeting took place at Watson Temple, where we were split up into groups, including economic development, education, crime prevention, community improvement, and we were able to come up with solutions. The Frenchtown Neighborhood Improvement Association, Carolina Oaks Homeowners Association, the Tallahassee branch of the NAACP, several businesses in the community, other interested persons, many pastors, Griffin Chapel, Philadelphia Primitive Baptist Church, others have joined in this effort. So we really want this to be something that's broad, that is very inclusive, and so that we can all be on one accord in the neighborhood. I'd also like to talk about a little bit about historic preservation as it relates to CRA dollars. There is specifically a building on located at 707 West Brevard Street. That is the last remaining wooden storefront in the Frenchtown neighborhood, owned by Watson Temple Church. That building was owned during the Tallahassee bus boycott by the Reverend Dan Speed, who was one of the leaders. And we, the church, Watson Temple, has been searching for years to try to find funding for that. Recently, Blueprint completed a great project where the last remaining commercial building from Smoky Hollow was restored and moved to Cascades Park, the old barber shop. Well, I'm hoping that the CRA will be able to do the same thing for the last remaining wooden storefront in Frenchtown, which is the historic Getty Speed building. Again, it's owned by Watson Temple. It's my understanding that the pastor has met with Miss Manning, but he was told that because it's a nonprofit that he wouldn't be able to get the money or something like that. There have been many other projects that have been funded where there's no tax increment, such as Big Ben Cares, such as the Urban League on multiple occasions. There have been other nonprofits that have received funding to restore property, and so I'm not understanding why he's being told that that can't be the case for this particular structure, which is very small in size, that we need about $100,000 to restore. So I hope that we might be able to get that funding for that historic structure and have it as a part of the historic trail that's going to eventually exist from Brevard Street to the Governor's Mansion. And also, we are actually sitting in the auditorium of the original Lincoln High School. I hope that this can be added to the CRA district, and also Mayor Daley, that in addition to the historical marker, that we can somehow get this building listed as a local historical landmark. Thank you.
I thought it was. Isn't it? Yeah.
Our next speaker I have is Ms. Maisha Mitchell, followed by Ms. Annie Harris, and then that will conclude the speaker cards that I have at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to hear some of the concerns of the residents in the community. I live at 812 Goodbread Lane, a long-term resident of this community, and the executive director for the Greater Frenchtown Revitalization Council, which is a Front Porch Florida initiative for 20 years now. So I want to talk to you tonight about the Community Benefit Ordinance. This is something I think that we're talking about sustainability and how we can keep things happening on the long term. Well, this might offer some idea and maybe some research from your people would be helpful. The Community Benefit Ordinance is a law that requires developers to proactively engage with the community to identify community benefits and address potential negative impacts of certain development projects. The ordinance was approved in Detroit in 2016. When the project triggers a CBO, this is called that, the council usually works with the voters to approve the ordinance. The residents have secured several commitments as a result of that ordinance, and the developers work with them through the process. So far, the process has secured more than $2.5 million to build 60 outdoor basketball courts in parks across the city, the restoration of abandoned school field for sports and recreation use, a skating park, also a free programming for local youth. They've also committed to providing more affordable rental, low-income units for residents in the area. Now, this ordinance applies when the development project is at least $75 million or more in value, or receives $1 million or more in property tax abatements, or receives $1 million or more in value of city land sale or transfer. When the project meets these requirements, the ordinance then works with the department planning areas to talk about the scope and define the impact area. The impact area has boundaries that are set by the census tract and will be expanded to include additional impacted residents to ensure that all residents in the impacted area have equal voice in the process. Then the city organizes committee meetings over a 3-month period to introduce the project to the impacted residents. They determine the potential impacts of the projects and establish further benefits. This process takes about 3 months, and it's usually 5 to 6 formal meetings depending on the size of the project and the need for the community. So far, the neighborhood advisory groups come together and they have established, let's see here, in 2008, the city entered a CBO, the Community Benefit Agreement, with local developers for a new Pittsburgh Penguins arena. This arena had a $750 million in public money at stake. They agreed to offer jobs ranging from $12 to $30 per hour, plus benefits, $2 million for a full-service grocery store with certain requirements to employ 95% of the people of color in that area and 65% of those people who live in the host community, as well as a state tax credit program that could provide up to $6 million over the next 12 years for neighborhood support. So I think this is something worthy of looking into to see how we can make sure that in Tallahassee we have something that's sustained over time. Because as we say, you know, you guys will be here, you may be gone. But if we have a policy in place, that'll protect the residents in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mitchell, for that recommendation. Our next speaker.
Our last speaker is Ms. Annie Harris, and that's all the speaker cards that I have at this time. Name and address for the record, please.
Annie Harris. I live at 436 West Georgia Street, where I love. And when I came, I really didn't plan to speak today. When I came, every drunk you could imagine was on the street, waiting for a sandwich from the kitchen at lunchtime. I could have easily waited and see if they're going to leave and move, but I couldn't. And so whatever's going on our streets, you can't stay in your house. If they're selling drugs on the corner and throwing paper and got barking dogs, you have to come out and get to know them. I know everybody on my street and several other streets. And the reason is when the new apartment came in, I didn't want the dogs pooping on my street and in my yard and all that, and I told them just how they had to do it. You know, they have to get to know you and you have to know them. It is not going to happen unless we all get on our streets and get to work. Is it easy? No. I would rather sleep sometimes than to go out and tackle it. I love my neighbors, and I meet with them and trying to help clean up. But listen, I had a lady outside of the credit union one day, and she was picking up paper. And I was going in, and I thought, do you live on this street? And she said, no, I don't have to. I need to make sure I pick up paper when I'm walking. I do the same thing. We all have to do that. And then we can demand a lot of things. And one of the things I would love to see, we do the art walk. We work with the university art students. We work with the class of Dr. Jackson. I think she's still here. She probably don't like me calling her name, but listen, we get the job done. And I'm saying to all of our neighbors, I love them. And Delatra came up. I just met with Urban League. I would love to see them get out and walk through these streets. The kids are doing drugs or selling or trying to hand you something when you go by, but you got to get out there. You got to know them by name. And once you know them by name, they're going to start moving on because they don't want you to call the police and that kind of stuff. But it's not going to happen. It's not a magic. Y'all don't have magic. You have some money, and we want some of it. And the thing is, if all the streets, like I want to extend the art walk, But, you know, I need some other neighbors to pick up some more streets. So when people come to Tallahassee, they don't just come to Georgia Street. They should go all the way down by the pond, and other vendors are set up and that kind of thing. I'm waiting for Virginia Street because I want to help clean it up. So whenever that happens, and I'm going to continue to work with Urban League and any of the others. But listen, you're not going to get it done in the house. I hate to tell you that. It's not going to happen. And I'm just asking that each person that came up here, take a look at what you do, then see how you can then make something happen and then come to the city. And I know I'm going to get a lot of complaints, but that's all right. I get them anyway. So I'm saying we thank you for the money you have been given. We need some more, and I'm sure they're going to work out different plans for there's 2 or 3 streets that they are on and paint some houses all pink or all green so we can walk down there and take a look at them. That's what we'll do. We're going to help each other. And I know, don't call my phone and tell me, how I'm embarrassing you, but that's okay. That's all right. And thank you very much for all that you do for us. And we'll still ask for money, but every time somebody come up asking what have they done lately on their streets and how is it working and tell us your plan. I thank you very much for the time, and I'm going home and watch the news, and it's crazy too. Y'all have
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Mr. Chair, let me just say that the best Annie? Coffee on Georgia Street is at Ms. Annie Harris' house.
Thank you so much. Okay, board members, that is our presentation. That we've concluded all of our speakers. Is there anyone else here who would like to address the board? Anyone else before we get into our board discussion? Okay, I don't see anyone. So at this point, we are on item number 5.01, board members, to have a discussion about our future, what we've heard, and what we think our future focus ought to be. Is there anyone that would like to start the discussion?
Mr. Chairman, can I start real quick? I just want to quickly say I apologize for being late this evening. I had a family obligation, but I'm glad that I can still make the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Bryant, I know you had some questions earlier.
We'll start with you, Commissioner Bryant.
Yes, I had opportunity to read our board package, and I have so many questions that I'm going to try and focus. The tax
Commissioner Bryant, would you like this Assistant City Manager or staff to?
Well, probably.
Ms. Manning. Oh, okay. Yeah, you might want to. Yeah.
Let me try and get a little closer. Probably Ms. Manning.
Okay.
Will probably be the person who can answer most of these questions, hopefully. The tax increment trust fund, the TIF, I think you said several times during your presentation that the money that's in that fund is for the area for which it's been designated. Is that correct?
Correct. It's for this specific CRA district in which it's generated.
Okay. So since I think I read that probably both of the districts were expanded over time, they changed. Let's put it like that. Is that correct? And please correct me. I'll be fine.
I don't think the downtown district has been expanded, but the Frenchtown Southside district has been expanded twice.
So my point is that there is opportunity to expand.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So as we sit here tonight and we hear several people come and ask why this area is not in the Frenchtown district, raises for me a very significant question as to why it's not and what needs to be done, what considerations should be made in order for that to happen. I really do want to know. I'm sure they want to know, but I want to know too.
Okay, I'd be happy to answer that now. Okay. I'm glad you asked because a couple of things tie into that. Another issue that we have is that the D streets, part of them are not in the CRA either. Now, what we can do is go back and look at the work that they did in 1998, 1997 to pull together the CRA district and define that area. That was Frenchtown Southside. At least as of tonight, in order to expand a district, you go through the same process that I talked about earlier, which is, we do a finding of necessity, we expand the district that way. And that takes several months to do that. It may or may not change when the legislature votes on their proposed legislation, so I'm just saying right now, that's how it's done. And basically what the board would do is say we're interested in expanding into this area, and we'd have to do the study to see whether or not the area met the criteria. So that's one issue. The other one is that typically large pieces of property that are publicly owned are not included because they're non-taxable, they're unlikely to ever be taxable, and they're usually very, very large, like, this whole site. If you look at the downtown plan, the state buildings, a lot of the city-owned buildings are not included. There are these big holes in that district as well, and that's probably what happened with this site, with this particular school site. But we can go back and see if we can find the records from '98 and see if there's any, discussion about that.
Okay, I would, and Mr. Chair, I would like for us to at least find out.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Second issue is I was reviewing the list of the large developments that was a part of your PowerPoint, and for most of them, well, it may even be all of them, I'm not sure. Are any of these large developments in African American neighborhoods?
Probably not. That, hang on, let me take a look and make sure. To put a large development like these into a neighborhood, I think would be really problematic. If you look at these, they're on larger streets like Monroe and Gain Street and Madison. They're in areas where that scale of development wouldn't eliminate a lot of regular housing.
Well, I think that...
Mr. Barber, we're in discussion with the board, please. Thank you.
I think that and I think really that we have many really smaller level projects, but I think we need to, maybe not at the magnitude of these. I understand you have to have somewhere to put, but we need some economic vitality in neighborhoods like the South Side and Frenchtown. And I can't tell you what they would be, but they should be income producing. They should produce jobs. Yeah. They should, I'm thinking help in the housing situation. We have to do, I think, more than just the small level projects.
Commissioner Bryant, one of those that I'm surprised has not been discussed is being led by your church and the Bethel Development Partners. There's a multi-million-dollar project being led by
the Frenchtown.
Yes.
That's correct, and that is going to be a fairly large mixed-use project. But some of the other projects that the CRA is involved in, for example, Goodbread Hills.
Yes.
That was a CRA project. We helped with Carolina Oaks. I mean, and there are parts all throughout the South Side where we've done some redevelopment that's residential redevelopment. We agree that it's important to do that, and we hope that working with the neighborhoods, that's what we're going to be, that's probably what we're going to be focusing on and working on for the next few, at least 5 to 7 years.
And the last thing I'll talk about is that the plan was developed in 2000. We are in 2018. Now, I have been asked by members of the community for me to get the plan. That's a little bit not as dated. Is it 2000, 2002? I don't want to misspeak. I think I read 2000.
2000. It was
2000?
started in '98.
we have to, the only way to be accountable for me is that you have to have a plan and you have to identify the projects that's going to get done. We have the high-level initiatives that we need to readdress. I'm not trying to do that tonight, but we need to have a plan. I want to know that you're coming in my neighborhood and you're going to do A, B, C, and D. And when it's projected to be done, the basics for me of strategic planning. And I don't think we have that if the last plan we have was in 2000.
Well, the type of plan that you're talking about, we are looking at in two ways. One, we have the implementation plan, and that's a very simple 1- and 2-page document that has programs and projects for the district, and it's a 5- to 7-year plan. What we're waiting for is to get some direction from the board on what you're interested in doing, what your goals are, and then we bring the implementation plan back. The other part that's not strictly CRA are the plans that they were talking about tonight, the bond neighborhood plan, the plan that they're putting together for Frenchtown. Those are the specific plans that we can use to invest money in the neighborhoods.
Those, to me, are the plans that need to tie into the larger plan.
Right, exactly.
But that larger plan right now doesn't exist, I don't think. It's back to 2000.
Well, no, we do have a redevelopment plan, and redevelopment plans typically are written very broadly, and for most CRAs, they last the life of the CRA. Now, we want to do an update here on our redevelopment plan, and we've in fact started on it, but we didn't want to finish that until we get the board direction from you, and then ultimately we're going to end up updating or changing the redevelopment plan draft that we have. We have to go out to the public for a couple of public hearings and then bring it back to you again. But that's because that plan is very broad, very general. That's not the one that we're going to work on first. We're going to work on the neighborhood plans first.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Williams-Cox. Commissioner Bryant, were you done with your question? Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I want to just share what has been my experience in participating in the CRA process before coming to this commission. I've been at the CAC meetings, and I've seen what happens at the CAC meetings. Now, if there's a redevelopment plan, I hope that that plan has been blessed by the CAC prior to coming to this board, because I understood that that's the process, and Sheila just shared too the process for an application. But I know that, and you are saying, we've had some very heart-to-heart conversations about a lot of plans, a lot of proposals that may be coming that we don't see the light of day. But what I'm hearing here tonight is that we need some sidewalks, we need some lights, we need some things that are going to help make people feel safe. We need some help with some housing, affordable housing. And I know personally, I wasn't on the board, but I was there and insisted that we add $500,000 additional dollars to the line item for affordable housing. Now, I'm not sure where that went, because I got busy running for office, so I wasn't able to attend the meetings like that. But where are the affordable houses? Where are they? Where are they slated to be? I think what I'm hearing tonight is that people want to see something.
Yes. And
we haven't seen it yet. So we need to be able to say when we're going to see it, if we're going to see it. And if we're not going to see it, just say that, we can't see it until fiscal year 2035 or whatever. But people tonight, I'm hearing an urgency that we can no longer, I'm not saying we were ignoring it, but we cannot delay further. That's where I am. And sitting here, I made copious notes. And there's some repeating themes: sidewalks, lights, safety, housing, just general things that everybody wants. Everybody wants that. So we have dollars sitting in banks that we need to crack the bank open and let's get some stuff going. Let's get it started.
Commissioner, we absolutely agree. And just to reiterate, we do rely on other departments to tell us where to put the lights, where to put the sidewalks. We're happy to do it.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that.
And they're doing that work right now, so.
Okay.
Commissioner Matlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess on that same line, Mr. Levins, on your presentation, you talked about the D streets in Macomb and Brevard and sidewalks and that plan you're working on. Do you know the deadline of when that will be finalized? No.
We don't have a deadline for it. Right now, we're prioritizing those streets. Those are ones that have come to the priority, and the groups will have to work together to identify which ones of those, as funding is available, that they want to move forward with first, and then from there, come up with a design for the street as well, and then move that forward by asking for funding to make that happen.
Okay. And I'm just going to share my personal perspective. The CRA is not the only source of funding that can invest money in this area in Frenchtown. So when we talk about sidewalks and things that typically the city of Tallahassee has invested in, and there's funds available for that have been given through Blueprint and other agencies, we need to figure out how we can mash all those together so we're really delivering. Because the last thing I want to do is make a promise that doesn't get delivered upon again, and we've seen that time and time again. And that's what I'm worried about. So I think back to the urgency, we need to go ahead and set the deadline for when not just a plan, but when we can know the dollar amount it will cost to invest in the streets in Macomb, Brevard, and the D streets, because we're about to go into a budget cycle at the city of Tallahassee, and we need to be sending money that way. So, I mean, it would be my preference by January 1st, we're breaking ground and putting in some of this infrastructure. So I'm not going to make a motion on that, but if we could come back with a time frame of when that type of plan could be done by our next meeting, and really have a time frame of when each step would be done.
And I agree wholeheartedly with you, Commissioner Matlow. I have heard a sense of urgency. There have been projects completed, but we need to certainly listen to the priorities that the community has come to us with here tonight. And as we go into our budget process, that's what really drives what gets done when. And so if those are our priorities as we go through the budget process, then that's what will get done. I mean, I think you heard Devin say that. Once the community comes together and that plan is developed, which I hope will be soon, then as we go through the budget process, we determine what projects will be funded and in what order, just as we've done with Blueprint. But I think what we've heard here certainly is that there's a sense of urgency to get some things done. And I have to say also, Commissioner Bryan, I was surprised that this is not included as a part of the Frenchtown CRA. I mean, this has always been a part of Frenchtown. I just assumed that was the case, and I guess you know what they say about assuming. So I would agree that there is something that we need to do in that respect, and the sooner the better we get that process started.
Excuse me, I'm very sorry, but this placemaking he's talking about has a boundary, has certain streets, it doesn't include everything. Is that correct? So when you ask him to do these things, he's only thinking about the new boundaries that he put in place. That doesn't come all the way down Brevard Street, or up Brevard, for that matter. It's just a few blocks. So you need to know that placemaking thing is not for the whole community. And so
Can we let staff respond to that? Can we let staff respond to that? Devin, would you respond?
Absolutely. Those boundaries were actually identified by the working group. It was not done by the city. The working group identified those, and you see most of them set up on the edge of their chairs as that comment was made. So she's correct. It is not the entirety of what they may be visualizing in Frenchtown, but we don't have a boundary of what Frenchtown is. Everyone you ask has a different boundary.
Right.
And that's a consensus from everyone that I've spoken with. There's a historic boundary. There's the greater Frenchtown. So maybe that's something else we need to do if we're going to come together as a community, is we need to define what that boundary is.
Right.
those D streets they're talking about, is that included?
Okay. Is Commissioner?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Co-
Yes, ma'am.
Whoa. Let's not, we've given everybody an opportunity to speak. Well, That's why we have and have encouraged anyone who wants to be involved with that working group to be involved and give. Okay, listen, we're going to let you all get together and work that out. We can't work that out as a CRA board. You all as the community have to work that issue out, really.
Commissioner Matlow.
Commissioner,
Okay.
Commissioner Matlow.
And I guess just to state that point again, we're just looking for what those projects were and to have a dollar amount by the time we go into a budgeting conversation or before we do.
But we've said we want community input, and we encourage that, and now we're saying it's okay. So we just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to give input, and that is considered. And so we will, again, once the work group has identified projects that they're interested in seeing done in the Frenchtown community, then we will incorporate that as we move forward through our budget process. Ms. Manning?
Just one other thing I thought people should know. So when the other departments do these studies and they make the recommendations with the citizen on what's going to be done, where and when, and who's going to pay for it, one of the processes that we'll have to go through as a CRA, because we're going to be funding a lot of this, is we will take that information, it will go to the CAC, you'll all have an opportunity to comment on that at the CAC, right? So we get public input there. And then it would go to the CRA Board with a CAC recommendation on it. You'll have another opportunity for public input. So I just want people to know this is not your only time that you would ever be able to comment.
Okay. Mr. Mayor? Commissioner Matlow, I'm sorry.
And this will be a little bit in the weeds, but I sent out an email to everybody with just kind of 8 recommendations and suggestions that I think in my business annually we look at what community feedback has been, what we might have done wrong, what we can do better, and how do we address that. So from what I've heard over, the last 5 months and really the years before that, I set out kind of 8 things that I think would help address some of the concerns. We're not going to be able to fund every project or do every investment, but I want everyone to feel like, they got a fair shake and, they're able to be heard. So I made 8 suggestions, and I'll just go over them really briefly. But what I would like to do is kick these to the CAC for review. I do care what the CAC says when they give a recommendation, and see if it's something they would like to recommend and have that officially brought back at our next CRA board meeting.
And that's why I asked that question earlier to Mr. Chris. I wanted to call his last name. I can't remember it, because I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to see your recommendations. I think that's very appropriate that be the process.
Okay.
Yeah,
and just for you, I'll just read them really quickly and not all the details. But community access, I think we should have the CRA office in the CRA district. It can be cumbersome to get into City Hall, and I think it's the type of agency you should be able to, drop in and ask questions and figure out what's available. So, I would recommend that we move it. The office is back into the CRA district. In appeals process, I've heard people have a project and maybe it gets rejected by staff for some reason and they feel like there's no other recourse. So if we can have an appeals process that either goes through the CAC or the CRA board to have a second official challenge to a decision. At the last CAC meeting, there was a lot of conversation about community benefit and what that means and how it should be defined. I think we need to take the time to really define what we mean by that, and I would also recommend that the CAC come up with their own ranking system or score, so when we have a project, we have a CAC recommendation if they believe it has community benefit. In a lot of development agreements, there's language about minority and women participation, but it usually says it's not a requirement for funding. I believe those things should be a requirement for funding if we're going to put them into development agreements. On development agreements, I think the final development agreement should come back to the CRA board. I think we've heard things about the Big Bend Cares development agreement from time to time and the restrictions that were put on that property. And I want to make sure if we're approving a development agreement, we're approving the final language, because I want to be held accountable to you. If you're unhappy with something, I want you to be able to blame me about it. The board chair, I think it was in the slide that we just elect that annually. I think that's a good policy. The executive director and agency management, I think this was about 6 or 7 months ago, moved under to the city. I know I'm speaking really fast. I just don't want to keep everybody all night. This was moved under the city manager's office, and I think it's just a type of agency that we should have more hands-on as a board, be able to communicate directly with the executive director and make some of those decisions, and especially if we expand board membership, which is my last recommendation, to have 2 members of the community, maybe somebody from Southside and somebody from Frenchtown, sit on really want the community's input, and actually having the community join our board, and that ties in with some of the other points of the city manager's office and how that would all relate. So that's the quick version. There's a public record of that if anybody wants to read it, and I guess I'll just move that we send that to the CAC board for recommendations and bring back to our next meeting.
Okay, I don't know that it necessarily requires a motion. Commissioner Matlow, if there is agreement among the majority of the board that that's what we want to do, I think we give staff that direction and start the process from there. So we'll have it reviewed by the Citizen Advisory Council, and then based on their recommendations, we would probably need to have staff do some type of analysis to make sure that we're getting all the information that we need to make a final decision based on the CAC's recommendation, and then it come back to us for a final vote. So if everybody's okay with that process, then we'll just give staff. I see a head nod. So, Mr. Mayor, did you have some comments you want to
Look, I appreciate the comments that all my colleagues have provided. And again, let me apologize that I was late to the meeting this evening, but I have heard a lot of the concerns, and we hear you loud and clear. This is a new board. This is a new day. This is a new direction. We look forward to partnering with the community and moving forward. And we are going to see action. We know the frustration. We've been hearing about the frustration, and we're committed to working with each and every one of you. I think my 3 colleagues, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you probably have some recommendations too. They're all great recommendations, and that's right. Let's let staff analyze them. Mm-hmm. Let's let the CAC have an opportunity to weigh in as well. Bring it back, and let's move forward.
Okay. And one of the things that I insisted on when I became chair, because I was hearing it from many members of the CAC that unlike other boards that came before the commission, they didn't have a report directly from the chairman of the CAC. And so when I became chair, I insisted that we add that item on the agenda. So each board meeting, we have a report directly from the CAC chair, and I'm not going to take credit for that. I'm going to give credit to where it's due, and that's to Keith Bowers, who serves. Keith had talked to me several times about the need for that, and so I felt that it was important that the CAC have that slot on the agenda to give a report and recommendations directly to the board. So Keith, thank you for that. Anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Cox.
just a point of clarification.
Okay.
I want to make sure, Devin, that we're not just talking about the working group, because the working group was defined prior to other groups becoming a part. We need a portal. I'm big on making sure we got one way in so that everybody's included, so we don't have to deal with factions.
Right.
So bring the working group, the other group, the D group, the C group. We need all groups to come together. And I'm gonna ask this because this is very important to me, and I know it's very important to any of us. And I heard the gentleman say that the performing arts, no one from the commission came. I think it happened prior to us being on the commission. Invite us to come to the meetings that you want us to attend, and we will definitely try to do that. I'm here, my colleagues are here. Invite us, and if we can come, we will come. And if we can't come, send us the information anyway, and contact my office if you want to come in a group or one at a time to talk about it. Come on, let's talk about it. I don't want to come back to the community and be shocked that something didn't happen that we thought was happening. Yeah. So please invite us.
Yeah. One last thing that because I heard several people say they were interested in the cameras. And I can tell you that was something we did in the bond community with community buy-in and feedback. There was a 30% decrease in crime in the bond community. And Ms. Perkins can attest to that. Mr. Turnquist, there was a 30% drop in crime in the bond community as a result of those cameras going up. So if that is something that the community wants, even on a trial basis, you know, we can work with the police department to make that happen as a crime prevention tool, a crime addressing tool in the community. But everybody has to agree that that's what they want, because.
And Mr. Chair, what made it successful in bond was that not only did the community request it, they had a targeted area.
Yes.
It wasn't random. It was targeted.
Right. And it did not target anybody's house. The cameras were not directed like in somebody's backyard or at their front door. And certainly the police department could work with you on all of those kinds of logistics, but it worked. A 30% drop in crime in the bond community. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else from board members? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned. Very good meeting.